There was a time when motorcycles didn't come with safety nets. No computers watching over your shoulder. No electronic nannies waiting to save you from a bad decision. It was just you, the machine, and whatever nerve you could summon once the light turned green. Back in the 1970s and 80s, speed was king. Every company wanted to build the wildest, meanest bike on the street, and riders wanted nothing less than raw horsepower bolted into steel frames that had no business holding it. Safety regulations took a back seat. Marketing was all about power. If you weren't faster than the next guy, you were forgotten. Or worse, you tried and didn't live to tell about it. This was the age when engineers pushed limits like never before. Kawasaki, Yamaha, Suzuki, Honda, all of them poured gasoline on the fire. Some of their creations became legends. Others earned darker nicknames. Widowmaker, White Death, Black Widow. These weren't just motorcycles. They were tests of courage, rolling challenges that demanded respect every single time you twisted the throttle. And that's what we're about to explore. The world's most dangerous motorcycles. Machines that didn't just make history, they scarred it. Some thrilled riders with straight-line speed. Others tossed men to the pavement without warning. All of them drew a line in the sand between those who dared and those who walked away. So buckle up, or better yet, hang on tight, because this ride is not for the faint of heart. 1983 Honda V65 Magna. If you want proof of just how far companies were willing to push the envelope, you don't have to look any farther than Honda's V65 Magna. On paper, it looked like a cruiser, built for long roads and classic rock on the radio. But under that laid-back shape lurked a monster that didn't care what category you thought it belonged to. Honda dropped a 67 cubic inch V4 into the frame, more than 110 horsepower waiting on tap. At a time when most cruisers were content just to rumble along, the Magna could leap from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 2.9 seconds. That made it the quickest production motorcycle in the world when it appeared in the early 80s. No fairing, no wind protection, just chrome, bars, and raw muscle. The problem was, the chassis and geometry were never built to handle that kind of fury. A long wheelbase and a relaxed fork angle made sense for highway comfort, but not for sudden bursts of superbike acceleration. Twist the throttle hard, and the front end would dance across the pavement like it had a mind of its own. Riders reported headshake, shuddering vibrations, and brakes that begged for mercy when pushed past their limits. The motorcycle press called it brutal, and they weren't wrong. Accidents piled up, and before long, Honda had to soften the engine's delivery just to keep riders from being overwhelmed. That's the danger of the V65 Magna. It looked like a friendly cruiser, but in truth, it was more like Russian roulette in polished steel. 1972, Kawasaki H2 Mach 4. If Honda's Magna was deceptive, Kawasaki's answer was the opposite. Bold, loud, and proud of its reputation as a handful. In 1972, they unleashed the H2 Mach 4, and the world of motorcycling has never quite been the same. Kawasaki took a 45.6 cubic inch, 3-cylinder, 2-stroke engine and stuffed it into a frame that tipped the scales at just about 424 pounds ready to ride. The result? 74 horsepower delivered in a way that was anything but gentle. From a dead stop, the H2 could rocket from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds. Numbers unheard of for a street bike at the time. But sheer speed was only half the story. The Mach 4 was notorious because the chassis simply couldn't keep up. The frame flexed like a willow branch in the wind. The suspension felt as if it had been borrowed from a 10-speed bicycle, and the rear brake was a drum that belonged in the 1950s, not on a missile of the 70s. The tires were narrow and overmatched, leaving little margin for error when the power hit. And hit it did. The H2's 2-stroke power band came on like a light switch. One moment you were cruising along, the next the engine slammed you forward as if someone had yanked you toward the horizon with a rope. Riders described it as being sucker punched by Mike Tyson. Sudden, brutal, and completely unforgiving. It earned nicknames that still send a shiver down spines. the Widowmaker, the Green Meanie, death on wheels. Yet for all its danger, it was a sales success. Why? Because it was intoxicating. It gave ordinary riders the straight-line speed of a race machine, and people were willing to take the risk for the thrill. The H2 didn't just frighten a generation, it forced the industry to wake up. From that point on, engineers had to start thinking seriously about stability, suspension, and brakes. But in the early 70s, the Mach 4 was both a curse and a crown jewel, a street-legal rocket that cared nothing for self-preservation. Yamaha RD series. 1973 RD 350. While Kawasaki's H2 earned its fame with brute size, Yamaha took a different path. In 1973, they introduced the RD 350, a small two-stroke twin that looked modest on the showroom floor. Just 21 cubic inches, 39 horsepower, and a weight of barely 342 pounds. By the numbers, it shouldn't have terrified anyone. But every seasoned rider of the era will tell you the RD 350 was a wolf in sheep's clothing. The danger wasn't the size, it was the way the power arrived. At low revs, it felt like a jittery scooter. Then the tack needle climbed, and all hell broke loose. The bike lunged forward, the front wheel pawed the air, and the flimsy frame twisted under the stress. With brakes that were decent at best, the RD 350 punished riders who underestimated it. It soon earned the nickname Black Widow, cheap to buy, but merciless to those who didn't respect its venom. 1976 RD 400. Yamaha didn't back down. Just a few years later, they rolled out the RD 400. On paper, it wasn't a huge leap. 27 cubic inches, 44 horsepower, a bit more torque. But wrapped in sleeker styling, it looked cleaner, sharper, almost refined. That was the trick. Riders who thought they were getting a civilized upgrade found themselves in over their heads. The RD 400 delivered its power even more violently than the 350. One moment you were steady, the next the rear tire snapped loose and tried to flick you into the pavement. In corners, one bad clutch release or a late brake input could send you flying like a stone from a slingshot. Sold in white paint on several markets, it quickly picked up the chilling nickname White Death. Outwardly elegant, inwardly lethal. 1984, RD 500LC, then came the crown jewel of Yamaha's two-stroke terrors. The RD 500LC, released in 1984. Inspired by Kenny Roberts' legendary YZR 500, this wasn't just a motorcycle. It was a race bike with a license plate. A compact V4, 30.5 cubic inches, 88 horsepower, and a sound like a swarm of angry hornets. On the street, it felt like carrying a live grenade between your legs. The trouble was, Yamaha gave it no safety margin. The suspension was soft, unpredictable, and the brakes weak compared to the engine's fury. At around 6,000 RPM, the motor hit like an explosion. No gradual buildup, just a sudden violent surge that tried to rip the bars from your hands. For skilled riders, it was intoxicating. For the unprepared, it was terrifying. With no ABS, no traction control, and no forgiveness, the RD 500LC embodied the very definition of living on the edge. It was street-legal Moto GPT, and if you didn't pray before riding it, you probably should have. The RD family wrote its own chapter in motorcycle lore. Small, light, and deceptively innocent at a glance, they proved that danger didn't always come in the biggest packages. Sometimes the most lethal bite came from a compact frame, buzzing with two-stroke fury, and a reputation that has never truly faded. 1997, Suzuki TL1000S. By the mid-1990s, the arms race had shifted again. Riders were falling in love with big V-twins, thanks to Ducati's success on the track. Suzuki wanted a piece of that glory, and in 1997, they rolled out the TL1000S, a motorcycle that promised character, torque, and the kind of mechanical growl that purists adored. On paper, it had everything going for it. a 61 cubic inch V-twin, about 125 horsepower, and a punchy power band that could loft the front wheel with a twitch of the throttle. But Suzuki didn't stop there. They tried to innovate with a brand new rear suspension, a rotary damper system meant to keep the tire planted through corners. In reality, it turned the TL1000S into one of the most unpredictable machines of its time. Accelerate hard, especially over bumps or mid-corner, and the rear end compressed in ways nobody expected. The front wheel suddenly carried too much load, and the handlebars began to shake violently, what riders came to know in hushed tones as a tank slapper. The frame didn't help matters. Light and flexible, it sometimes twisted under the V-twin's instant surge of torque. Without traction control, without ABS, the TL1000S demanded lightning-fast reflexes and nerves of steel. Many riders didn't walk away unscathed. Suzuki eventually fitted a steering damper at the factory to calm the beast, but the damage to its reputation was done. The TL1000S was no longer remembered as Ducati's challenger. It became known as the widowmaker of the 90s. For some, that danger only added to its allure. For others, it was a hard reminder that innovation can backfire, and sometimes the price of progress is paid in broken bones. 2000 Kawasaki ZX-12R. If the TL1000S was dangerous because of flawed innovation, Kawasaki's ZX-12R was dangerous for a different reason. It was simply too much motorcycle for most men to handle. By the year 2000, Kawasaki wanted to answer Suzuki's Hayabusa with something even more ferocious, and they did it by building a missile on two wheels. At its heart sat a liquid-cooled inline-4 displacing 73 cubic inches, 1,199 cubic centimeters for the metric crowd. In unrestricted trim, it made more than 180 horsepower, with some tests nudging close to 190 once the ram air system started force-feeding oxygen at speed. The ZX-12R could tear past 180 miles per hour and keep climbing toward the magical 190-plus range, numbers that put it squarely in the fight for the title of fastest production bike in the world. But here's where the danger came in. Kawasaki gave it a stiff aluminum monocoque frame, sharp steering geometry, and hard suspension to keep it stable at high speeds. At lower speeds, the bike felt twitchy. Push past 150 miles per hour, and the front end lost its planted feel, like the air itself was trying to pry the tire off the pavement. Crack the throttle in mid-corner, and the whole chassis could shudder, leaving you wrestling a nervous stallion at full gallop. With no traction control, no ABS, and no electronic lifelines, the ZX-12R offered no second chances. You either rode with perfect control, or the bike reminded you, in the universal language of asphalt and bruised bones, that respect was not optional. It was breathtakingly fast, brutally unforgiving, and in the wrong hands, a glass cannon that could shatter lives as easily as it shattered speed records. Looking back, it's almost hard to believe we rode these machines on public roads. The Honda Magna, the Kawasaki H2, the Yamaha RD series, Suzuki's TL1000S, and the Kawasaki ZX-12R, they were all products of their time. Built when horsepower was cheap, frames were fragile, and safety was little more than an afterthought. They scared riders, thrilled them, and sometimes hurt them. Yet in their own brutal way, they also defined entire eras of motorcycling. Today's bikes are a different world. Traction control, ABS, selectable ride modes, quick shifters, even electronic suspension. They exist to keep you alive when your hand makes a mistake. On a modern sport bike, the computer steps in before the worst can happen. But in the 1970s, 80s, and even into the 2000s, there was no such safety net. One wrong move, one moment of overconfidence, and the bike settled the score instantly. And maybe that's why we still remember them. These motorcycles weren't built to flatter you. They were built to test you. Every mile was a gamble, every corner a question of skill and courage. They reminded us we were alive, in the most thrilling and terrifying way possible. So now I'll ask you, did you ever ride one of these beasts? Do you remember the rumble of the H2, the sting of an RD, or the sheer speed of the ZX-12R? Share your stories in the comments. And if you want to dive deeper into Yamaha's two-stroke demon, the legendary RD 500, just click the video on your screen.